Latin cooking, when I looked at the spectrum of the marketplace and what was out there competitively from other chefs and other cuisines, I saw that Latin cooking still had a huge hole in it. Still,
Hmm.
big market, and still to this day, it's
Yeah.
still kind of open. It's not like, there hasn't been a big ascension of Latin chefs promoting Latin culture and cuisine that I've seen. There
Right.
certainly are some, but could be more.
Hmm.
And and so when I made that decision to like hone in on Latin cooking, that also changed my whole trajectory and my whole way of thinking about this career and where I could do it.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Stay Tranquilo, our Cafecito y Croquetas segment. Today, we are joined by a special guest, Chef José Garces. A pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, as part of this, I know you're involved with CookUnity, so I definitely want to bring that up as part of this conversation. But before any of it, a big part of all of what we like to do here at Stay Tranquilo is share stories, right? And we would love to be able to share your story. Tell us a little bit about how food and cuisine and cooking became such a part of your life.
Wow. Well, it's such a long story on this. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, so a little over 30 years, and really, it started for me in my home, in my parents' home. My parents were both they were both immigrants from Ecuador in the late 1960s. I was born in the early 70s. I won't date myself too much, but and I grew up in a Ecuadorian-American household. My parents, really just trying to make ends meet, put food on the table, give us a good education, and create a good home environment, and at the same time maintain our like Latin roots, our
Hmm.
Ecuadorian roots, while I was out there on the street, trying to be American, kind of really, socialize and kind of, live this lifestyle of assimilation while keeping true to my roots. So food was always a big part of that in my house, and my parents, my grandma, all really great cooks. My grandma in particular, Mamita Amada, was a amazing cook. She was the matriarch of our family, taught everybody how to cook. In fact, I brought her to me in her late 80s. I had this thought that she could help me raise my 1-year-old daughter at the time. And little misguided in the planning. She was cooking all the time. She wasn't watching my daughter. So, uh, but no, it started at home for me. And I think being exposed to such great cooking, and that was a familial event, especially on the weekends. But my mom would
Hmm.
get home from work, and she would make a meal, and oftentimes I was there after school. I was her sous chef in the moment. She recruited me, and I just had a love for the kitchen from a young age. And again, having those Latin flavors introduced were really still at the center of my cooking, still guide me every day after all these years.
No, that's amazing. And it's funny, right? When you talk to, people in your space, right? I think there's a commonality in the fact that there's always some sort of family influence, right? Generational influence. But I think
Yeah.
even deeper than that is kind of like you mentioned, right? That Latino aspect, right? Because it's such a true part of our culture, right? It's a true part of our identity. I look at, I'm not a chef by any stretch of the imagination, but I do enjoy to cook, right? And part of the reason why I believe to this day why I enjoy to cook is because of my abuela, right? Being in the kitchen with her, seeing her. And for me, it was interesting because I've always been close to my grandmother growing up, and she was a big part of, even raising me at a young age. But she actually was brought back into our household late in life, right? So I got to appreciate her and her cooking in a very different way than I did when I was young, right? When you're, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, you're just eating the food because it tastes good, right? And you're like, okay, that's great, right? But I wasn't really immersing myself in the kitchen as she was cooking. Fast forward, 20 years, a few years before she passes away, she's there cooking every single night. And she's like, what do you want? You want arroz con pollo, tortilla, right? It was always something. And
Yeah.
I look at it now and I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I had to I had that as part of my life, because when you talk about generational influence, right? And in your case, your work's influence, it's cool to see how it's passed on from generation to generation, because that's how we keep these Latin traditions alive. And I think that's something that's so unique in this space.
Agreed. And I think if you're raising a family, I'll say this, and I had the good fortune of bringing my mom into my world when I raised my kids, uh, and she was such an inspirational, such a motivating factor for the kids, not only from the language standpoint, but from the food. I
Hmm.
mean, they came home and they had great meals every day after school, and I
Yeah.
think they so appreciated that. Now my children are now. One's 23 and one's 19, and they're good cooks. They enjoy the kitchen. They
Right.
enjoy making food. And so I think that in that moment I was like, man, I really could use my mom's help because I'm working and I'm doing things. But the language and cultural impacts of having their grandmother around was I think amazing for them, and really I think I've seen them grow up so far to be like really good responsible adults, but also ones that
Right.
care about tradition, care about Latin foods and cooking.
No, I mean, we're the next generation, right? So how do we keep those traditions alive? And I think food is one of those things. Music, right? So many
Yeah,
different layers that come to it. My tradition that I'm Cuban American, right? My grandparents were born in Cuba, and one of the traditions that I grew up with was around Nochebuena, right? The caja china, and cooking the puerco, right?
right.
On the 24th before Christmas. And I remember around 18 years old, no one was really willing to keep the tradition alive. My grandfather already had passed away. Family members had moved, and everyone kind of just does their thing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna put it upon myself to keep that tradition alive. And now it's been 12 years where I've been doing the pig every single year, and it's become like a staple. And it's brought everybody together. Right now, it's like it's something to look forward to. And I look at it and I'm like, shoot, if I don't do this, then what are we doing on Noche Buena? Are we just ordering something from La Gareta or something like that and calling it a day, right? So it is
Yeah,
pretty awesome to see, and being able to carry traditions through the next generation and the next generation, and hopefully my kids do the same when that time comes.
good for you. And I'll just tell you, I've been a part of that tradition. And my ex-wife, my first wife, Beatriz, is Cuban,
Okay.
and her family is in Miami, and we've maintained a great relationship, co-parenting relationship, uh, beautiful relationship, to the fact that we celebrate the holidays and special occasions and birthdays together. And Noche Buena has been in Miami
That's awesome.
for many years, so I get it, and I love that tradition. One I think that's special and should be celebrated for sure.
Absolutely. So obviously, family influence for you, but when was it for you that you realized, hey, not only do I have a passion for this, but this is something that I could turn into an occupation, right? A career, something that at the end of the day is something you're passionate about, but you can obviously make money and make a living off of that.
Yeah, so I went to a few years of undergraduate college education,
Hmm.
and I came to realize that it was not for me.
Hmm.
Just academia wasn't really calling me. There wasn't any subject matter or anything. It was like, oh, I could really do this.
Right.
And I went to culinary school in search of a vocation or trade, because at about 19 or 20, when I was looking for where's my path is going, what am I
Right.
going to do here, and I had no one in my family was in hospitality or the restaurant industry or any aspect of it really, other than we love to cook at home and we love good meals.
Right.
uh, I got to culinary school, and I realized, for me it was definitely like I need a vocation, I need a trade, I need to find ways to like make a living.
Hmm.
And I figured, I like working with my hands. And it was also, I was a high school athlete, and I realized that structure and discipline around in my life was important, and I found that in the kitchen pretty quickly. The uniforms, the crisp white hats, just kind of the brigade style system, the order that was needed in order to create meals was something that was a calling. But really, the the moment where I was like, whoa, like I'm cooking amongst all my classmates and I'm cooking pretty well. And I'm kind of outperforming everybody. I'm thinking about food when I go home. I'm in my home kitchen on the weekend, like getting my knife skills down, peeling carrots, like
Hmm.
chopping onions, just working on my skills. And I'm for the first time in my life, I was inspired to go outside, go above and beyond my, just kind of what the assignments were in front of me. And so it was a discovery. And it was a discovery that again was very serendipitous, I was fortunate to find this craft, this love that I had. And I really I'm very thankful for that moment that I walked into that school and it got me and it opened up my eyes to all other aspects of the industry, whether it
Right.
was working in a cruise line, working in a hotel, working in catering, working in restaurants. I was just like, oh man, and I can travel and go
Hmm.
and in the search of great food. And so for me, it was just such an amazing discovery at a young part of my life.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, I think 18, 19 years old, right? That's that age where everyone's doing that soul searching, right? It's seeing what you like, what you don't like. And
Mhm.
both are just as important, right? It's like you hear so much, oh, you got to do what you love, right? But I think to find what it is that you love, you also have to find what you don't like, right? And I think for you, that was something that happened early on, right? Where you're sitting there in school and you're saying, "Hey, this just isn't for me." And I think that's a huge part of the process of just self discovery at a young age, just really trying to identify who you are. What are the things that drive you every single day? What are the things that are pushing you to wake up and say, "Hey, I want to do this today," right? Because it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the rat race, just saying, "Hey, I need to make a quick dollar," and all of a sudden, 20 years go by, and you're like, "Damn, I never really did what I wanted to do," right? So, props to you to going out there and chasing the dream, because at the end of the day, we know that it's definitely not easy.
I would imagine that I went through a lot of trial and error to get
Hmm.
to that point,
Right.
or a lot of odd jobs and different, putting myself in different experiences that were like, oh, this doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
So when I did find that, and again, I feel lucky, and you're right. Like it's scary to think 20 years can go by and you're like, oh man, I still haven't found that.
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And I know that
Hmm.
happens. I know that exists for folks. Um, but again, I'm grateful that I found it, and I think it's a process for sure. And I think everyone should, as if we can, mentor the youth to go and really go through that trial and error process. Explore, find
Absolutely.
out what works, what is driving you, what is going to drive, what is going to make you wake up every day. And I had a I had a moment in cooking where
Hmm.
I was French classically trained, and I had opened a Greek restaurant. I'd worked in an American contemporary restaurant as well in New York, and I worked at the Rainbow Room. And even after those experiences, I was like, okay, but where is this going? I don't have like a specialty. I don't have like, really something that's driving me. So I had to pivot in that moment too and be like, okay. So I realized that, Latin cooking, when I looked at the spectrum of the marketplace and what was out there competitively from other chefs and other cuisines, I saw that Latin cooking still had a huge hole in it. Still,
Hmm.
big market, and still to this day, it's
Yeah.
still kind of open. It's not like, there hasn't been a big ascension of Latin chefs promoting Latin culture and cuisine that I've seen. There
Right.
certainly are some, but could be more.
Hmm.
And and so when I made that decision to like hone in on Latin cooking, that also changed my whole trajectory and my whole way of thinking about this career and where I could do with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think there is a massive gap in still and just Latino focus across the board, right? Where you're talking sports, food, music, right? Obviously Bad Bunny and like the Super Bowl, you see what type of impact that has. And I think there's so much insight and data, right? That's behind there saying you got to pay attention to the Latinos. You got to pay attention to that marketplace, right? Because it's the largest growing demographic in the United States. They represent over $3 billion in purchasing power, right? So there's a ton of data to back up exactly what it is that you're saying now, right? Like, not only do we eat the food, but we listen to the music and we partake in the events, right? So I think there's so much to be said about that market, and we do food a little bit differently, right? And I think what's also unique about the Latino market, right? You could be Cuban, you could be Puerto Rican, right? Colombian, Venezuelan, right? And yes, there's similarities between each one of them, but there's also so much difference in the cuisine. So I would love to get your perspective on that. Like, what is it that makes it so unique? What is it that makes it so special?
Oh man, right in my wheelhouse, man. Good job, good work, good. Way to tee that up. That's awesome because I wrote a book called The Latin Road Home, which it focuses on five Spanish speaking countries. So Spain, Mexico, Ecuador, Cuba, and Peru. And I write menus from each country that are weekday menus and full blowout like
Wow.
weekend menus. And the book is based around that, but it really is talking about the distinction between the various cuisines. And I think what you have is just a lot of different influences, and each country has had its own share of conquerors
Hmm.
and other inspirations from different countries, different like ethnic groups that have come into the country and created that cuisine. So you might have in the Caribbean, you might have a little more African influence, where in Mexico you might have more Spanish influence, but then obviously the call it ancient cuisine of Mexico that has uh, man just lasted so many years and is still relevant to this day. I think that actually that story needs to be told a little bit more. Um, and then I think you go to South America and it really it's I mean it's so varied when you get down to Argentina and Chile
Hmm.
and kind of the meat cookery and this idea and then also like a little more European influence. And then I'm from Ecuador and have traveled to Peru in search of cuisine as well. And so those countries also have their own unique style and competitive nature. Like whose ceviche is the best? Peruvians or Ecuadorians, they'll
Right.
fight about it all the time. And so there's a lot to be told there as far as like the differences, but I think it just comes down to um, just influence. Who's been there, who's
True.
settled there, who's spent time, and who's imparted their own like flavors and styles. And that's the beauty of cooking is
Hmm.
uh, the influences. So I'm here in Portland, Maine right now. I
Okay.
live we recently have become Mainers over here, and I'm just loving the access to coastal seafood. There's great farms around here as well, and but now I'm here, right? And now
Right.
I'm going to start cooking my food in this area, which doesn't really exist that much. There's some of it, but there's not a lot of it.
Right.
And so I'm hopeful that I can share some wisdom, some knowledge around Latin culture and cuisine, and yeah, bring it to Maine. So it's a
That's
fun
cool.
time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It doesn't like you said, it doesn't really exist right now. You could be the one to bring it into an area that doesn't really have too much of that presence, and then all of a sudden, that opens Pandora's box of shoot. Maybe more and more people want to start bringing that influence into that area, which I think is that's how it's got to be.
Well, and I go back to my Philadelphia story. So I've lived in Philly 25 years.
Hmm.
Just recently moved up here and I raised my kids in Philadelphia. It's a beautiful place for me and my family. We had a great professional career as well as community building that we did there. But when I opened Amada, my Spanish tapas restaurant in
Hmm.
2005, there were 0 Spanish restaurants
Wow.
in Philadelphia.
Wow.
There may have been 1 or 2 that were saying they were Spanish or they were like a coffee shop sort of thing doing cafe con churros, but really no restaurants. And so within, we opened Amada in 2005, and I got a James Beard nomination in 2007, and just some notoriety around the restaurant. And next thing you know, there's like 4 to 5 new Spanish restaurants in the area. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, guys, have at it, go for it, bring it on. and the more the merrier, because we're teaching folks, we're educating them on Spanish culture and cuisine, and that's something that I've had a lot of pride in doing. No matter which concept I created, it really is about bringing culture and authenticity back to the table, and sharing those experiences with everybody.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a key word in all of this, right? Authenticity. How do people bring out that authenticity, right? I think it's easy when you have some sort of influence, right? Whether you're from these places, you visited these places and spent some time, but how do you make sure to keep that authenticity?
So, we were talking about earlier around like just, my exposure to the
Hmm.
opportunities that exist in the culinary field. And one of the ones I really treasured, I really like just was like piqued my interest because I'm a traveler by nature. I enjoy traveling and exploring, and to do it in the for the sake of food, for the sake of learning,
Hmm.
has been everything. So any restaurant brand that I created or concepted always involved a pretty deep dive into like culture in terms of going to, if we were opening an Argentinian steakhouse, I spent time in Uruguay and Buenos Aires and Argentina, just
Hmm.
understanding. Um, and certainly, I lived and worked in Spain for some time and traveled there pretty extensively in order to really uh, honor the cuisine,
Hmm.
honor it the best I can. And
Yeah.
there's always, I'm never gonna like hit it perfectly. Somebody's grandma is gonna say, "Hey, that's not really pulpo gallego. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
This sort of thing, and that's fine. Nobody's ever gonna be, I think, as authentic as it's just hard to like pinpoint that.
Hmm.
But um, definitely trying to stay true to it, and really, I think to me that exploration is a big part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know you had an iconic moment with Bobby Flay, so I definitely want to bring that up. Talk to us about that experience, just being involved with him, and just kind of that time of your life, and what that meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think competitive cooking has been a big part of my life, and it
Hmm.
was certainly, and not so much anymore. I'm kind of happy that that part
Right.
is good. I'll be happy to go judge and hang out and all that. But
Right.
it was a pretty intense time. I battled Bobby on Iron Chef America in 2007.
Hmm.
I had actually auditioned that year to become. They had a show called The Next Iron Chef, season one. So I auditioned, didn't make the cut, but they said, "Hey, you did pretty good in your audition. Why don't you come and compete on Iron Chef?" So Bobby and I did Battle Melon, and it was like Crenshaw melon, baby watermelon, honeydew, all different kinds of melons. And we just brought, I think, a little more contemporary style of cooking to Kitchen Stadium that day.
Hmm.
And it was a pretty epic battle. I'll never forget it. And I think we managed to beat Bobby, which was fantastic,
Yeah.
great. But that led to my next step, which was becoming an Iron Chef. So in 2009, I auditioned again for the second season of Next Iron Chef. And I beat nine other competitors
Wow.
on that show to become an Iron Chef, which was uh, pretty awesome. Like that whole experience. So on that show, we had battles in Tokyo and then the finale in New York, and it was just epic and kind of life changing in many ways. Because once I became an Iron Chef, it opened up opportunities,
Hmm.
opened up relationships that I still hold today, and was able to battle pretty regularly on television, year in and year out, on Food Network, and it was awesome. It was so much fun. It was one of the most exhilarating things I've ever done.
Absolutely. And when you kind of look back at it now, obviously you know the opportunities and everything that it was able to provide for you, right? You get that publicity and so many people become aware of you. But when you look back at it, maybe when you were 10, 15 years old, let's say, right? Did you ever envision yourself maybe doing something like that? Taking your cooking onto a show like that?
No, I was at 10 or 15, I was heavily into like football and wrestling.
Okay.
So I thought if I was going to go anywhere, it might be, play in college, play in the NFL, whatever. You know, it was like the dream, right? I
Exactly.
didn't think
Yeah.
so. The thought of cooking competitively never crossed my mind.
Hmm.
Really, it did not. But the competitor in me
Right.
was always there.
Hmm.
So I think I brought that competitiveness from my, childhood and middle school years to the table, and yeah, still do every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you obviously sports have been a big part of your life, right? Even I know CookUnity, they've integrated themselves and positioned themselves in the sports space as well. But I want to get your perspective, as a chef, like what is that combination between cuisine and sports, right? I mean, I think there's kind of like this growing, what's the word? Kind of like just growing dynamic, right? Like culture and sports, and whether that's through music, that's through food. But I'm curious what your perspective is, right? Like how do those two worlds kind of collide?
Well, I think first off, from just a competitive
Hmm.
standpoint, we are as chefs, we are in business to make money, kind of raise dollars,
Hmm.
raise sales, have our food really be a business for us.
Right.
So just at its core. So when you're in a marketplace, you're competing,
Hmm.
right? You're competing against the guy up the street. My burger is going to be better than yours, whatever. And that's just the
Of
reality of
course.
it is we're competing. And so sports is obviously a competitive in nature by every stretch. So I do think that sports and food really collide all the time, and
Hmm.
just again just from a competitive aspect, and as chefs we compete to again make the best dishes we can make. But I think what's happening with food and sports right now, again outside of like the business side of it,
Right.
is just that there's a health and wellness aspect to cooking now
Hmm.
that really aligns with competitiveness and being healthy and being using food to fuel yourself to be the best competitor you can be. So it's great to see that the chef craft can really mold itself towards using creativity to create healthy delicious meals, and that's one of the things that's been happening at CookUnity is they really have as a company initiative, have said, hey, there's so many special dietary restrictions that folks are out there. They're looking for, they're craving.
Hmm.
So let's use our most talented chefs to create delicious, healthy meals, and that's where we're at right now. It's low fat, high protein, um, really low carb meals that really taste good, and so that's where I think that both things are coming aligned, and it's not only for sports, it's also just lifestyle
Right.
in general, right?
Right.
So it's great to see all of that come together.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is crazy this health conscious boom that has come. All right. I'm here in Miami, and I think we've always kind of been like a very health conscious city overall. But since I guess, post pandemic, right, it's really been this big boom of just being more conscious about your health, right? That's from the food that you eat, just being more active and just kind of creating a very holistic, healthy lifestyle. And food obviously is at the forefront of that. But the reputation around food too, right? And I think you nailed it, right? Food as fuel. And I think more
Mhm.
people need to understand that yes, food is important, right? Like you shouldn't not eat just to try to like lose weight, right? It's eating, but it's eating well and it's eating right. So as kind of like a restaurant owner, right, where you kind of have that creativity side, right, where you're trying to create a unique menu and be different out there. How do you balance both creating a unique menu while also being health conscious?
Mm. Well, I think it's like you'd mentioned, balance,
Hmm.
because even though there is a craving or a desire for healthy meals, the market still wants to be they still want to be satiated with
Right.
the delicious, craveable items,
Absolutely.
and so while on Cook Unity, I often have to balance. I have a few great really good selling dishes. So I have a let's call it JG's adobo mac and cheese. It's a chicken mac and cheese with
Mm.
adobo, and it's just like, calories are not there. If you're calorie conscious, it's not the dish for you.
No.
But here's the thing though, it sells. It
Yeah.
sells well. So then, but I'm also considering our marketplace for those folks that are seeking a healthier options. And so I think it's just being aware and conscious and creating that right balance that
Absolutely.
work,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, definitely. Well, I think one thing that really stands out to me. I tried CookUnity's meals. I've had a range of different items that Carlos, who helped put this together, was able
Yeah.
to get to us. And I mean, right off the bat, I remember looking through the menu. I'm like, holy cow! I mean, there are so many options to choose from, right? And one thing that stood out to me was the creativity, right? For me, when I think about like cooking and food, right, it's an art, right? It's a form where you can just kind of like be yourself, test things out. Even if you maybe mess up and you put a little too much here, a little too much seasoning here, right? Like it's a place to be creative and test, right? And
Mhm.
I think that, like, Cook Unity's menu does a good job of showcasing that creativity where you have so many different chefs to choose from, right? Obviously, including yourself, but you have something for everyone, right? Whether you're looking for that comfort food dish or you're looking for that healthy item, it's important to have a little bit of variety because it kind of gets old and boring eating the same thing over and over. At least for me, like I can't eat the same thing all the time every day, because then it's like you kind of lose that motivation.
Right, right, right. And I think what's unique about Cook Unity is it's not there isn't a master plan around the
Hmm.
meals. They're allowing for artists,
Hmm.
chef artists,
Right.
to do their thing, right? They're never really trying to pigeonhole us or put us in a place where, like, this is the first time they said, "Hey guys, will you guys focus on some healthy meals? Like, there's a market that
For sure.
wants that, like,
Hmm.
and right, so perfect, guys, no problem."
Hmm.
But there's this abundance of just creativity when you have several chefs that kind of come together. So, um, and that's the beauty of the menu is that you have all this variety. And again, not because I'm on the platform, not because I love what we're doing,
Hmm.
but there is nothing closer in competition, in my opinion, for the fresh food that you get at Cook Unity. It really is like, if you look at some of our other competitors, a lot of it's like mass produced, it's industrialized, it has, maybe some frozen vegetables that are thrown in there, et cetera. This is all what I love about it is it's fresh food delivered to your door. And I mean, my meals all taste really good. So I'm not, but it really is, it's a special thing. I think I'm really bullish on the company, and I hope they continue to grow, in a positive way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we kind of wrap up here, I definitely want to ask you some fun rapid fire type questions.
You got it.
You're from Philly, or you lived in Philly for over 20 years. So Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, is that the lineup for sports teams for you?
So I'm one of these unique, let's say, sports fans. I do
Uh-huh.
love sports. So I grew up in Chicago too. So I have and I split time. I was almost at a certain point. I lived in Chicago 22 years, and Philly 25 years. I've developed great relationships with the organizations in Philadelphia, though. They're great people. Uh, but I would say Eagles, Bears.
Okay.
I would say Cubs, Phillies.
Fair.
I would say uh, Bulls, Sixers, and uh, Blackhawks, Flyers, even swap. But
Okay.
yeah, I think again going back to sports, it's just it's a great thing to be associated and really get to know these organizations.
Hmm.
And yeah, what could be better?
Absolutely. It's interesting too, right? All these stadiums, ballparks, right? They've taken it upon themselves. Like, how do we provide, a more unique food experience in these stadiums, right? It's not just burgers, hot dogs, and chicken tenders anymore, right? I mean, you're seeing sushi in there. You're seeing, arroz con pollo. It is crazy to see, especially depending, what cities these stadiums are and these ballparks are, right? Where how do you create kind of a hometown feel through the food in these stadiums, which I think is great. I'm all for that.
Right. Well, actually, I have one of my concepts. It's called Buena Onda. It's a
Mm,
fast casual taqueria in Philadelphia. And we're in the Sixers and Flyers
there you
stadium.
go.
We're front and center when you come in.
I love that.
And so, um, I personally get offended when I overpay for a hot dog or a cold cheesesteak.
Right.
So I love that the organization said, "Hey, let's get the hometown chefs in here. Let's create meals that are stadium worthy and are memorable." And yeah, that's how it should be. I mean, come on.
100%. Next question I got for you is, if you had one piece of advice for an aspiring chef, right? They're going through the motion, maybe looking to open their restaurant, maybe get that first job. What would be that piece of advice to them?
I think I've always and I mentioned it earlier is find
Hmm.
your niche, find out where you're going to
Hmm.
be most comfortable, where you could be most effective. And if it's for me, it was like realizing that Latin cuisine was kind of an open market and
Right.
something that I'm obviously Latino that I could dig into and do. I think that was a driving point for me. So, and then once you have that, um, and here's the big one is I realized at an early age that the industry can be kind of a grind, right? It can be kind of like if you're in it and you're not speaking up and like, trying to move ahead, you'll just be a cog on the wheel. So you have to really aspire to hit the goals that you'd like to do. So if you're my goal when I first got in the industry was to open my own restaurant. Number one, like that's
Hmm.
if I said, hey, when I get there, I'll be good. And so I got there and it was a great achievement. I hung out for a couple years in that moment. And then I said, okay, this is great. Now what's the next thing I could hit? And so I really think understanding and creating some achievable goals is a big one.
Absolutely. And I got to get your top three Ecuadorian dishes.
Oh, easy peasy, man. Easy, easy. So my grandma used to make, and they cook them in Manta, these empanadas de verde. So
Okay.
that's a green plantain empanada. That is what's cool about it is there's no flour or butter in the dough. It's just the plantain and the natural gluten that happens when you rice it 3 times. It gets really like gelatinous and gluteny. Perfect for an empanada skin, really tasty.
Interesting.
That's number one. I think always my fallback is Ecuadorian shrimp ceviche. Ecuador produces the best shrimp in the world, and my family is our shrimp farmer, so I get good stuff.
Wow. Okay.
And then I would say, lastly, I really love biche de pescado. It's a seafood soup made with plantains and achote, and it's just very like warm and comforting. Something about that. I'm like kind of a soup guy,
Okay.
and it just really it embodies Ecuadorian cooking from that area, from that region, and it also has just a depth of flavor with great seafood from the Pacific.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I got to try that. I've never tried that, and I'm assuming based off of those facts that then there's not really a debate. Ecuador does have better ceviche than Peru. Is that what we're saying here?
Oh,
Or
I can get me in trouble with that one. Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna say better or
right.
worse. What I'm gonna say is I appreciate certainly both cuisines and their mastery of seafood and ceviche. But I went to Lima and Cusco and went to the fish market in Lima like several years back. I mean, it was phenomenal. It
Yeah.
was really, really special. So there is a mastery, and what I also love their Japanese influence that's in
Yes.
Peru, the Nikkei style
Hmm.
cuisine, which kind of lends itself obviously to fresh fish and raw tiradito style ceviche. So there's good disciplines on both sides. I hope my Ecuadorian friends and family don't get on me about this.
Well, I will say this, right? I mean, I learned that Ecuador, it is known for ceviche. I didn't know that until we had this conversation, right? Peru has always been like Peruvian ceviche is always kind of what you see out there in the restaurants, and it's kind of what's always been put out there. So now educated in the fact that Ecuador is known for ceviche, and now I gotta do a little taste test myself, and then I'll get back to you and I'll let you know.
Please do. Please do. Keep me posted.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Chef, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for one, sharing your story and your knowledge in the space. I think there's still so much to talk about in this world, especially around like the Latino influence in food. I think there's something to be said about how much opportunity is there, how much passion is behind that, and would love to continue that type of conversation as well. But more than anything, I appreciate you taking the time today, sharing your story, and bringing some perspective in the food world.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that. It was a pleasure to be here, and yeah, let me know. Happy to come back on. Love the vibe and topics you guys are covering. It's cool.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, stay tranquilo. That's where we are. So if they want to find you, where can they find you?
So you can find me at actually you can go to chefgarces.com and you'll see all of my work. All that I'm doing is on there. CookUnity, my pop-up dinners. I have actually a really cool aspect to my site. It's called a cuisine library, where you can go on and there's a video and full recipe of everything we've
Wow,
been making the last several years. So, and it's free, no subscription charges. Go on and get cooking.
amazing. And then your book, they can also find there on your website as
You
well.
could find it. You could find my. I have two cookbooks on my website. The restaurants that are also listed
Okay.
there, and my philanthropic mission, which is the Garces Foundation. We help the underserved immigrant community of Philadelphia through two programs: community health care programs,
Wow.
as well as English language classes. We have our big event coming up this week on Thursday, where we'll
Wow.
host 600 people. It's a Latin night market, and it's our fundraiser for a good cause.
I love that. That's amazing. I didn't know. Well, appreciate you for letting us know that. And if you're in the Philly area, to get involved, obviously. So appreciate it
Yeah,
again, Chef, for your time. Appreciate everything that you're doing for the community, and we'll talk again soon.
you got it. Take care. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, guys.